Welcome to the Tripod, where we break down the NRL every game, every week from a punting perspective. I'm Jacob Wynn, and this is the live NRL Round 7 recap. And we are struggling, or struggling would be an understatement at this point. It's fair to say it's an all-time low. That's off the back of losing both best bets. Neither was really close, and losing the mixed matchup, and then, of course, not winning a multi this round either. And, you know, whether you're backing our bets, whether you're just following for interest, or whether you're betting against them, no matter what, you're getting a front row seat to this struggle and to this fight if you are tuning in, whether you're watching, especially if you're watching live. Appreciate you and share your thoughts, or if you're watching after the fact or listening. So today I'll talk about those best bets. We talk about them before we give them out. We say why, and then we talk about them after, and we assess whether we were right or wrong, what we can learn, as well as other observations I've got for round 7. I particularly feel bad for the people who do support us each week, because you guys are probably the ones backing the tips as much as anybody. So it does genuinely hurt. It always hurts when you lose, but we are sorry. And some people have tried to console me and say, oh well, it's been there's been some surprising results this season, so don't get too down. But I wouldn't use that as an excuse, because we don't try and pick likely results. We are trying to find the surprises as much as anything. So if there's a few upsets and things like that, that should help us. So that's definitely, not as an excuse, because we're not trying to pick a favourites multi each week and then complaining, when an unlikely, result pops up. So fact of the matter is, we've got to do better. Now, you'll notice as well that the Padonis is not here. And so now we can talk about him, and I can say what I really think about the Padonis. And the truth is, it was always going to be one of the toughest gigs possible for anybody to come onto this show. I mean, I felt 2 years ago when Alex left after we hit 63%, it was an impossible act to follow. Then last year, I was really proud how we did. So you're coming into a show that's had, results that you pretty much can't beat. And then it gets harder every year. So what I want to make really clear is I'm having the final say on every best bet, and the vast majority of the best bets that we've shared on the pod this year would have been my best bets if I was solo. So if I had carried on same as last year, which was awesome, and if I'd gone exactly the same formula this year, I'll make it clear, we would have a losing record. So I completely understand people are frustrated, and I know it's easy to look at what's changed and kind of point the finger, but please direct that frustration at me, because I'm the one making the calls. My calls haven't been good enough. And, if I look a little deeper at our process, again, people may not like to hear this, but it's pretty apparent because we talk about games we lean. We're both over 50% winners on our likes and leans, but the games that we're overlapping has a losing record, as everyone can see. And the record's, there for all to see. So we never hide that. So statistically, that feels like kind of crazy that the ones we're overlapping, haven't panned out too well. Whether it's going to continue, that's up to everyone to follow, who follows along, to judge as well. You've got to judge yourself how confident you are, and then you decide which players you follow, or which players you agree with and which you don't. As I say, keep sharing the feedback, share your disagreement by all means. Some people disagree with the best bets this week. I have total respect. If you come out and say, I think you're wrong, here's why. And anyone who did that this week, and there was a few, I tip my cap to you, you got it right, and you backed some winners there. Only thing I ask is just don't be nasty. At the end of the day, we are doing our best. We do nothing else but our best, and we do it all, for free. So as long as you just don't be ultra nasty, happy to kind of talk punting with anybody. Some positive notes. The cameos that we brought on a couple of weeks ago, Ben Willie, or BJ Willie 1003, he gave us a winner on the NRL. And then this week, Dane XV, you can follow on Dabble, he gave us the Brumbies plus 5.5. Not only did I witness that line come all the way in to pick them by game day, the Brumbies won as an outright upset by double digits. And he also tipped it at 270 on Dabble. So we give these guys a spotlight for a reason, that they're doing, outstanding work. And we want to share that with you as well. And we are a community, so, get around these guys in our group, and you can follow these guys on Dabble, and we'll have another cameo coming up this week. All right, let's go game by game. Let's try and talk about what we might have learned, and you guys can let me know your takeaways from the footy action this round. Obviously, there's one game to go, but I'm going to get this in before the Storm and Warriors game kicks off, where we don't have a play anyway. So Thursday night, Sharks 32, beat the Seagulls 22. Did have a lean to the Sharks. Looked like, I was kicking myself, looked like the easiest win you could imagine. It was 32-0 at halftime. I'm sure if you didn't see the game, you heard about what Talakai did. I cannot actually recall in the first half if Talakai got tackled in the Manly red zone. I really believe every time they got the ball to him, he either scored, he passed for a try, or the only times, literally the only sets that the Sharks didn't score when on attack in the first half was when they didn't pass to Talakai. If someone thought, oh no, I'll bluff and I'll go myself or kick through. I really think those were the only times they didn't score. It was like watching an under-8s game where like a 15-year-old's in there or something. It was absolutely ridiculous. Obviously, Matty O'Keefe's tuning in. He's a staunch Seagulls fan, so I'd be interested to hear what he has to say. But it was Harper mostly on the receiving end of that, getting an absolute bath, which was quite shocking to me in that a week earlier, Manly came out really staunch defending. Like, we know there's no turbo, so everyone else has to pick up the slack. But, they held the Canberra Raiders and the Titans to very modest totals, good defence, and then come out in this one, down 32-0, get blown off the park at Shark Park. But that wasn't the whole story, because the line for this game was 6.5, and that actually was in the balance with, 10 minutes to go. At one point, Manly had pulled the game back to 32-22 and on the attack, and a grubber in the in-goal, and Davey is the first man there. He kind of muffed the grounding. It would have been a 4-point game very late with 26 or 28 unanswered Seagulls points. And not only was the cover in question, but the result itself, like Manly could have won for all that. Now, I do think a part of that was the Sharkies putting their cue in the rack a little bit, easing off. And, they're still building as, a true contender. You've got to respect what they're doing and probably start to talk about them as a contender. Coming into this week, I spoke about how, I still don't think the Sharks are as good as a team like the Roosters. But as we have to do every week, we've got to reevaluate what we think. I saw a comment before about maybe Padonis and I being too stubborn in our beliefs, and I think that's fair feedback. And someone else said similar to me this week, which was, are you guys sticking a bit too much to your guns? If you're a bit wrong on a team preseason, you don't want to keep on, making the same mistakes. And that is the challenge in week-to-week punting for sure. You don't want to overreact. I know for sure that betting with recency bias just based on what you saw last, that's not going to win. That's what most people do. So you do need to stick to your guns. But at the same time, sometimes what you've just seen recently is a true reflection of what's happening right now. And sometimes what you believe to be true can be wrong, and you can get it wrong. And unfortunately, we've kind of have gotten our read on some teams wrong. And I underestimated the Sharks a little bit for one. Not that we, bet against them here. And as I say, like, the cover was no certain thing. In a way, I feel bad for you. If you had Sharks 13+, you thought you'd already cashed the ticket, you'd be in the queue. As we say, Seagulls fought back. That's important for them to do that. Moving to Friday, this was a game with a big swing as well. And obviously pre-game, all the COVID news came out. That was one reason we stayed away from it. I felt like in the end, the players that the Dogs lost because of COVID and having to bring in a couple of players who I don't think were even top 25 contracts into the starting side, but a couple of these boys, they were not disgraced at all. They held their own, and the line was 10.5. And I actually thought that's a generous line for the Dogs. They haven't lost that many players from COVID, but I guess it was also just the disruption. Mind you, if you took the start with the Dogs, which was as high as 10.5, and you could have, it closed 8.5, so some sharp money came for that, you definitely felt like you'd made a great bet. I mean, the Dogs were winning the game 14-6 in the second half. They looked desperate, and this is a team that hadn't won since round one. So when they get a sniff and they feel like we can win this game, they're gonna fight tooth and nail. The Broncos just look to be kind of stumbling, but Adam Reynolds changed the game, and this is a kind of signature performance for him that justifies the big money that he was recruited on, and his play, that chip ahead and the regather, that try which pulled the Broncos back in the contest, and then Reynolds had a hand in every subsequent try as well. And what I think happened is, the Dogs are holding on. They're up by 8, and then a bit of a long-range try, and the Doggies are getting a bit nervous, and Brisbane's within 2. Then Brisbane hits the front, and, you're still fighting when you're within a try. But then the moment that the Broncos got the lead to 10 points, then the Bulldogs, they cracked. At that point, they were done. It's kind of like you can hang on for so long, but then once you don't really believe you can win the game, they folded late. So in the end, Brisbane won by 20 points. It wasn't really reflective of the fact that it was anybody's game with kind of 20, 25 to go. The next game, which won't be too fun for me to talk about, is the Cowboys 30 pumping the Titans 4, our first best bet of the round. And we took the Titans plus half a try. So what did it end up? Was it 5 or 6 tries to 1? So the game itself, definitely I'll talk about, needing, like, why we got it wrong. We need to reevaluate the Cowboys. We've been too low on them. We had bet against North Queensland 3 times before this weekend. And to be fair, they did lose 2 of the 3 that we went against them. And the one game that the Cowboys won when we went against them was the Raiders game in Canberra. And I kind of put more blame on the Raiders for losing rather than giving the Cowboys too much credit. So, in hindsight, I have underestimated this Cowboys team. Part of the reason I think the Cowboys are surprising myself, but I'm sure they're surprising a few people. I think that we need to look closer at teams that were a bit downtrodden last year and are not downtrodden now. Like, if you were the Cowboys with a month or 2 to go in the season, you knew you weren't making the 8. You kind of just want the season to end. You got a new coach. He's being pretty hard on you. Like, they just didn't have energy or confidence towards the end of the year last year. You come into this year, you've won half your games. Now they've won more than half their games. They honestly, would believe they can make the finals. They're playing like a finals footy team. Everybody's upbeat, and it's like incremental improvement from everybody. Plus, they've got a young pack. Naturally, they're improving as well. And the Titans are kind of the opposite. The Titans were in the hunt last year. They weren't that great last year, but they were in the hunt just because of an anomaly with the ladder that a team with a losing record was going to make the 8. So it kept all these below average sides in the hunt. And in the end, the Titans scraped into the 8. I think their record was 10-14. But now it's like we're kind of flipped. Like, now the Titans are 2 from 7, and I've got a couple of really tough games coming up. Feel like their season, is nearly on the brink. As we get some friendly feedback coming through, I appreciate it. As I say, just try not to be too nasty, and definitely, if we give a tip and then people say after the fact that was the worst tip ever, to me it makes me think, well, before the game, did that make the other side like the best bet ever? Because if that's the case, I'd love to hear, people make the counter argument. We never kind of claim to be right all the time. The game itself, in the first half, the Cowboys were the better team. They scored 3 tries to 1. Their first 2 tries, or at least I think their first and their third try, came directly off the fact that David Fifita was playing in the centres, and they just ran around him. He just didn't have the pace to be out there. And one was a long-range try. They just go around him and put the winger through. And the other, Drinkwater, runs around Fifita off a scrum and just cruises in. So, you roll the dice with a move like that. Maybe the Sharkies watched Talakai, what he did on Thursday, and thought they could replicate that with Fifita. But this is the other side of the equation. When you put someone who's a power athlete, maybe just doesn't have the mobility to chase around, fast outside backs out there. So the other Cowboys try was kind of like a deflected kick. And then on the other end, Titans scored 1 and had a couple other opportunities, had an extremely close call that they couldn't overrule on the bunker. I kind of felt like, all right, Titans didn't have too much ball. You come out in the second half, the Titans had the running. They were down 12. They looked the more energetic team. Nanai got sent to the sin bin. This was the most critical period of the game. Now, you felt like the Titans have to score 1 or 2 tries in that period. They had all the momentum, all the ball, all the territory, and they're against 12. And they couldn't come up with it. And there was a key moment where the Titans got waved a 6 again, and it's 0 tackle, and the ball ends up in a front rower's hands. And I'm thinking, all right, sweet, just take a settler. No, he throws it to Sexton. And Sexton, along with Brimson, I thought was so poor, because if you can't score points, you're eventually going to be conceding them. And Sexton throws a double cutout on 0 tackle. to Fafita's ankles. He drops it. And soon after that, the Cowboys get 13 back on the field, score straight away, and that broke the Titans' hearts. I think it's a different game if the Titans can score when they had the man advantage and had everything going for them. But the fact they couldn't is an indictment on them, an indictment on their attack, and it's credit to the Cowboys. And then what happened after that is similar to the Bulldogs, I believe. You got a tight game for an hour, and then when it doesn't go your way, you fold. And that's not a good thing either. The fact that the Titans, rolled over in the end and let in some late tries. And as I said, they've got a tough draw ahead. And Holbrook in the post-match interview, and I feel like a losing coach doing this with in the post-match, trying to wrap up what happened. He kind of sounds like, oh, well, we played for Fafita there because we haven't been winning. We've got to try something. That starts to reek of a bit of desperation to me. I know Campbell comes back in the team, but there's no simple fix. Now, after the Titans had played 6 tight matches, they're just second best. As for the Cowboys, as I say, playing at a top 8 level, in fact, I think you could probably only pick out about 4 teams playing better than North Queensland right now. I would keep Drinkwater in the side. Whether when Hammer comes back, whether you slot Hammer into the centres, nobody's playing bad, but whether you slot him in for Hiku or you slot Hammer in for Val and you move Val to the wing, I think Drinkwater has proven that, hey, he's a first grader and he should be in that side as well. I do have a clip to share, Padonis, although he's not with me live. He shared a bit of a recap, and he had some thoughts on that Titans-Cowboys game as well. So I might bring him in. Let's hear what Padonis made of the round. The reason he was not able to be on the show tonight is he was actually at the SCG for that game. So he witnessed the second losing best bet, which I'll talk about soon.
G'day everyone, Padonis here. Thanks for tuning in. And I was just at the game live, and apologies for not being on the show. But given the week we just had, I couldn't sort of leave Jacob hanging. I had to come on to share my thoughts. We're an 0-2 in our best bets. Again, losing the mixed matchup. Another poor result for us, and this sort of losing streak continues. Have the faith, though, will turn at some point. We sort of will see the ball a lot better, but at the moment, especially the 2 games we just picked, it wasn't even close. We had the first game being the Gold Coast Titans against the Cowboys. They should have sort of been up for the game. Holbrook even said he wasn't sure why they're putting such a poor performance defensively with the ball. It was one of the worst performances that they've had this season. It's their biggest losing margin this season, which had to sort of correlate with the time that we did jump on them again. The Cowboys were great. They showed a lot more resilience and a lot more attacking intent than what the Gold Coast showed, and they're beginning to be a thorn in our side of the season multi. So hopefully that they can sort of show some regression that we called before the start of the year, but at the moment they're sort of defying all odds. And then moving on to today's game, look, the Roosters couldn't have played any worse in that first half. I think they had plenty of ball. The Dragons were gritty, and the longer the game grew in, and the Dragons were hanging in, then sort of more confidence that they did get. They showed a lot of defensive resolve when they're on their line. So looking at the game live, the Dragons were gassed in the second half. The Roosters couldn't take advantage in a few bomb tries, and even at the end they could have won it. But I think the Roosters have all the talent in the world, but they just sort of haven't been able to put it together yet. But look, even if they did win the game, it didn't really matter for us because we had minus 11.5 as our handicap. And to be fair, the cover didn't even come close. So a shout out to a few of the guys in the group who sort of opposed the pod and took the Dragons. Great work, and to everyone else that's sort of supporting us and followed us. It's been a lean spell, but we'll get there, and appreciate the confidence, and see you Wednesday, back better than ever, and we'll be ready to go. Handicap round 8. Ciao.
Yeah, do appreciate the positive support. And as we say, the beauty of betting is there's not one bet that we all either have to make or not on the weekend. There's unlimited amount of bets you can make. So what we want to do is just create an environment where people share what they're backing and why, and then people can decide, who makes the best case or what you agree with, what you take. The game of the weekend, obviously Padonis just touched on the game that he just attended, which was our other losing best bet. But back in chronological order, Saturday night, we can't miss this one. The West Tigers 23 beat the Rabbitohs 22. So this was the game of the weekend and probably the surprise of the weekend, although Dragons was a surprise to me, that's for sure, today. But, the question was coming into this one, can the Tigers back up Easter Monday? And to me, backing up Easter Monday meant being competitive against the Rabbitohs. I don't feel like the Tigers had to win to prove anything. None of us really thought they would win, but they came with that effort and they won by the same margin as they did on Monday. Now, how did the Tigers win this game? If you didn't watch it, the truth of the matter is they didn't, blow the Rabbitohs away. They weren't outstanding. A 16-3 error count goes a long way. So 16 errors for the Rabbitohs is really bad. You're not going to win a game like that. In saying that, you give credit to the opponent. To some degree, you force errors by applying pressure. And 3 errors for the Tigers and a completion rate above 90%, it's not, there's a bit of luck when you have that sort of disparity between you and your opponent, but you also give credit to a side that completes that high, and the Tigers got out in front, which also gave them confidence. But I mean, not everything went the Tigers' way. Each team's exchanged a sin bin, and in fact, the Tigers had to come out in the second half playing with 12, and the Rabbitohs, they were holding them at bay, and the Tigers were in front, and then the Rabbitohs scored on a kick on 5th tackle on the final second before the Tigers would have got their man back. I thought at that point, okay, the Rabbitohs are going to overtake and now just kind of cruise on with the victory and maybe still cover the double-digit line. But and another issue for the Tigers too was Dane Laurie, MCL injury late in the first half, so he didn't even play the second half, and he's crucial as well. We know the difference Hastings has made to this side, but Laurie, who was out 2 weeks ago, was a big part of the win last week, and he's so important to what they do. So they slotted Ty back in the back line or at fullback. And to me, this game, I thought this is the type of game that the Tigers, now a few things have gone against them, man in the bin, you lose your fullback. This is the game that Cody Walker will take by the scruff of the neck. He assisted the first try for the Rabbitohs. He then scored the second try for the Rabbitohs. We've kind of been waiting for him to come alive, but he didn't do much else after that. And I think that's a function of going back to just the Rabbitohs never built pressure because the Tigers were really secure with the footy, and also because the Rabbitohs, anytime they were trying to build pressure or get territory, they were spilling it. And they spilled the ball. Luke Brooks picks it up, runs 60 metres, scores the try that puts the Tigers in front. Things like that are pretty lucky, but you make your own luck when you fight hard. And the Tigers fought a lot harder than several other teams this weekend. That had them in the game. And, each team had chances to win, field goal attempts. The Rabbitohs, a moment they'd love to have back was when their field goal attempt got shut down. They spread the ball to Jai Arrow. And I know that Jai Arrow must have been thinking in his head of what Capewell did to them in round 1, where the second rower stepped back in field and kicked a field goal. Jai Arrow tried to do that, and it fizzled away along the ground level and went for a 7-tackle set. The Tigers went back down the other end, and Luke Brooks this time, after Hastings had a couple of snaps from long range and not drilled it this week, Brooks is the hero, kicks the 1-point winner. Tigers hang on. They've won two from two. They play the Dragons next week, which actually looked like a very winnable game, but you've got to respect the form of the Dragons today. It's still pretty wild stuff. While I talk about some positives, another pretty solid positive is that we tipped the Bulldogs at 15-1 for the wooden spoon in the preseason. And now the Tigers get that win, and obviously the Dogs, the Brisbane game was winnable on paper. They lost that. So now they're clear bottom of the ladder with their solitary victory. Moving to Sunday, couple of games that were both blowouts, so probably don't need to spend as long unpacking them. One team that was really disgraced was the Newcastle Knights. They lost at home 39-2, and that was after they were up 2-0 as well. I can't even really make excuses for the Knights. Ponga had to go for an HIA first half. That certainly didn't help. They needed him. They never really got much out of him, but nobody really did too much. To me, it just looked like this Eels side was really smarting and, playing like a side that wanted to redeem themselves off an embarrassing loss and just got ahead of steam. Paulo came back into the team and the Knights were never in the game. And this is a side that often would play better than their ability when they're at home in front of that home crowd. And that home Newcastle crowd, they don't even expect you to beat anybody with talent. They just want to see hard work. And some of the try-line defence by the Knights was diabolical, to be honest. So, yeah, they're under a lot of pressure. After starting 2-0, they've now lost 5 weeks in a row. I guess that's kind of similar to the pod. We're a winning record after 2 weeks, but we've had slim pickings for the last month, that's for sure. So Can they turn it around? I've got more confidence we can than them, because I'm not sure that the Knights have got too many answers or too many kind of solutions they can turn to. And that could be similar for the Raiders as well. They came into this one against the Panthers. Ultimately, the Panthers won 36-6. It was a bit tighter than that. It was 6-all at one stage. Actually, I think this Panthers-Raiders game was quite similar to the Panthers-Brisbane game, if you caught that a week ago, in that the losing side loses by 30-odd points, but weren't really disgraced. Like, they did fight hard for the game, but this Penrith side is just immense. The halftime margin was only 8 points. Again, it's frustrating. Said on Wednesday, that was a play we're very close to giving out, was Panthers minus 9.5 second half. So would they win the second half by 22? And they never really looked like letting up in the second half. In fact, it was some crazy stats that for 35 minutes of the second half, the Raiders never had to play the ball over halfway, which I don't think it ever happened. It was like over 50 Panthers tackles in the Raiders half to 0. They finally got on with a couple of minutes left, but then they dropped the ball. So if you understand all that and the amount of pressure, then you'd actually, commend the Raiders for only letting in the 6 tries. The game was over at the point that Stephen Crichton scored 2 tries in 3 minutes around the hour mark. And that kind of brings up interesting argument and topic, which are open to you guys to share as well, like who gets the left centre position for New South Wales. Latrell's probably not going to be back in time. Stephen Crichton's certainly in the mix. They're going to pick a lot of Panthers players in key positions, so he fits in with that. But he's not the only option. In fact, he was butting heads with Jackie Whiten, who doesn't play left centre but has played left centre at Origin, has been in the Blues side. And it's not Whiten's fault that he doesn't play on a side that's as stacked as Penrith. So, do you play Jack Whiten? He's a candidate there. Do you move Staggs? Another guy from a struggling team. And speaking of struggling teams, is Matt Burton, does he get a look in at left centre? That's going back to, his team's playing bad this year, but he's from the Penrith system. In fact, he played left centre. So interested to hear what people's thoughts are on that. But in the end, once Crichton got that double, then it was game over. It was only a question of how many is Penrith going to win by. And in the end, they did run in a couple more tries late, win the game by 30 points. As I say, counts for nothing if we say we were close to making it a best bet. I know some people messaged me and said they still bet that, which is great, but we can't hang our hat on just leaning in the right direction. So move on to Monday, where we certainly didn't get it right. And, the type of bet where you're laying points and the team's trailing the whole game, those are really frustrating ones because you don't even really feel like you're a chance to win. And it surprised me. Being Anzac Day as well, want to pay respect to the veterans out there and understand what the day's about. It is a big occasion. And I'm not saying that the Roosters, disrespected the occasion. They just were off the pace and they started slow. And that gave life to the Dragons because I didn't think the Dragons were that great today, but I thought that they were certainly desperate. And once they got out in front, then they knew they had a chance and they just clung on for dear life. And I feel like if the Roosters could have executed, and again, you talk about the error count, the Roosters had 15 errors today. So I think that's the story of why the Roosters didn't win this game because you hold your opponent to 14, you don't let in any points in the second half, should be enough to win a game, but couldn't execute. They did make more line breaks. They did have some half chances and they did come late and they easily could have won. But, go back to give all the credit to the Dragons because it was pure desperation. Late in the game, Roosters on the attack, they dragged Keary over the sideline. After that, when they're coming out of their own territory, they'd be kicking from inside their 40 all second half. Hunt, who won man of the match, he kicks a 40-20. That just relieves so much pressure. But even then, on the final set of the game, the Roosters had a length of the field set, made a break, and support runners to Walker, who had streaked away down the sideline. But I think Lomax gets a hand on a pass. Lowry dives on the ball. That's just ultimate desperation and clinging on for the win. Now, I go back to that bad start by the Roosters. for one, they started Radley off the bench and then conceded the opening try straight through the middle, untouched to a front rower. That was a pretty poor start. And again, not to really make excuses because, they barely had a chance to win the game, let alone cover. But in the post-game interviews, I start hearing that reporter talking about there had been a flu bug through the Roosters camp. And not that the Roosters made an excuse, but you just kind of think, oh, beauty, just that certainly wouldn't have done us any favors, regardless of how impactful that was. But it's worth mentioning because when we watch these games, we're trying to assess these teams. So what do we make of the Roosters, moving forward? Does that make an excuse for them at all? I definitely think I've got to downgrade, my read on the Roosters, even though I think their ceiling is still really high and probably top 3, they're just building to that. And it's disappointing because we really thought on a big occasion that would be the game they'd get there. But they're still, as I say, I think the errors is the story of the game and the slow start. I think you combine the two, you're going to give your opponent a big chance to win. And give credit to the Dragons. Ultra desperate, got them over the line in the end. For what it's worth, we are desperate now coming into round 8. We'll sit back and watch this Storm Warriors game now. We did have a lean, may have just kicked off, but we did have a lean on Wednesday night again. Whether you think our leans are worth betting against or if you think we're that unlucky that what we lean to but don't back probably wins. But it was a similar story to Penrith where we could only play the big favourite. So we were thinking Melbourne second half line -9.5. So it'd be interesting to see how that goes along. Good luck if you've got any bets riding into this final game. Always punt responsibly. And as I say, I'm super proud of, the history of the pod and the thousands of tips and the years that we've done this. But I don't want to hide behind thousands of tips or years and say, the past speaks for itself. I completely understand. We need to prove ourselves every year, and we certainly need to prove ourselves to everybody this year, the way it's gone so far. So we'll be back to do our best at that on Wednesday, and we appreciate you if you tune in. We'll see you there. Have a good week before then, and Lego.